The night of our 20th wedding anniversary should have been a celebration, but it unveiled a truth that shattered my world. I had planned a romantic evening, Darren's favorite meal, followed by the gift I'd been secretly saving for. But when I reached into his jacket pocket to retrieve the theater tickets, my fingers brushed against an odd rectangular shape. Pulling it out, my heart stopped as I stared at the receipt for a diamond necklace from Cedars Jewelers. Darren walked in just as I was unfolding the damning piece of paper. "What's that?" he asked casually. I could barely let the words tumble out. "When were you going to give me this?" He glanced over and paled. "Oh, that. It's not for you." The room started spinning as the implication struck me. I stumbled over to the couch, my hands shaking. You bought another woman jewelry?" Darren sighed and grabbed himself a beer from the fridge like it was just another day. "Listen, Marissa, I haven't been happy for a long time. I've met someone else, someone who appreciates and desires me." My ears started ringing as he droned on about this mystery woman. I could barely process the venomous words pouring out of his mouth. "Her name is Lena, and we're in love. I want a divorce so we can stop living a lie." I stared at him, unseeing. "After 20 years? Just like that?" He shrugged nonchalantly. "I'm sorry, but it's over. God, we'll have to split assets and figure out what's best for Ethan, of course. I'm seeing a lawyer first thing tomorrow." "So that's it?" I screamed, the betrayal and humiliation burning through me. The vase of fresh roses I'd bought for our anniversary went crashing against the wall, stemming briefly splattering petals over the hardwood. "You just throw away 20 years without even trying to fix things?" Darren didn't even flinch. A detached look on his face as he studied his beer bottle. "There's nothing to fix, Marissa. We're just delaying the inevitable by staying in this loveless marriage." I wanted to claw his eyes out, rage and disbelief coursing through me. Who was this stranger casually destroying everything we had built? Then a new fear gripped me, cold and hard in the pit of my stomach. "What about Ethan?" I whispered, trying to regain some composure. "You can't take him from me." "Don't worry, we'll negotiate that too. To be honest, he'll probably want to live with me and Lena once he gets used to the idea." White-hot anger flashed through me again at the thought of some homewrecker trying to replace me as Ethan's mother. Screw being civil. This was war. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Darren thought he could just waltz out and discard me when it suited him. But I wouldn't go down without a vicious fight. I would use every ounce of strength to protect my son and make Darren pay for throwing away our sacred vows. He was about to learn you don't terrorize a wife and mother without suffering the consequences. The night dragged on in a blur of tears and anger after Darren's bombshell confession. I barely slept, my mind spinning over his callous dismissal of our marriage vows. How could the man I loved discard me so easily for some young tart from the office? In the cold light of morning, I got my first look at the woman he'd risked everything for, Lena. Just 28 years old, with a vapid social media presence full of pouty selfies, she looked barely older than the college girls I counseled with fake breasts and hair extensions. I felt ill thinking about Darren's wandering hands on her plastic body. Over bland cereal that scratched my raw throat, I asked Ethan if he'd suspected anything. My son just shook his head, eyes vacant from the trauma of seeing his parents' marriage implode. I longed to protect him, but Darren had other ideas. "We need to talk about living situations," he said in an infuriatingly calm voice when I refused to answer his calls. "I think it's best if Ethan stays with me during the separation." Like hell, I spat, unable to mask my fury at his audacity. "You really think parading your office mattress in front of our son is appropriate?" "Don't start with the insults, Marissa. This is hard enough." My blood boiled at his feigned concern. "You threw our family away the moment you stuck your dick in that bimbo." "Mom," Ethan gasped, clearly uncomfortable witnessing our toxic exchange. "That's enough," Darren said sternly. "This hostility isn't good for Ethan. We'll discuss custody arrangements through our lawyers." "You mean your lawyers," I shot back. "Which shark did you hire to take my son away from me?" He sighed in exasperation. "Always the drama queen." Those 4 words detonated my anger into blinding fury. "Drama queen? I spent 20 years caring for our home and child while you chased money and strange." I hurled the closest object at hand, a ceramic chicken objet d'art that Darren's mother had gifted us. It shattered against the wall next to his head. "Mom, stop!" Ethan cried out. But I was seeing red, unleashing 2 decades of resentment. "You never appreciated any of my sacrifices. Well, if you think I'm going down without scorched earth retribution, you're dumber than you look." Darren flinched as shrapnel pelted his designer shirt, finally seeing the menace in my eyes. Without a word, he strode out, letting the front door slam behind him. I collapsed onto the sofa, with his chest heaving, as Ethan stared at me warily. I was consumed by a new protective rage. Darren wanted to cast me and my son aside like rubbish? Well, he was in for a brutal awakening. I may have lost my husband and the life I'd known, but I would claw my way through hell to ensure Darren's ultimate demise, both professionally and personally. He wanted to see drama? I would become his worst nightmare, stopping at nothing to destroy him. Ethan didn't deserve to see this war. But I had no other choice now. The man I'd loved had become a soulless enemy, and by God, he would reap the agonizing consequences. I needed a plan. Some way to fight back against Darren's legal barracudas and regain control over my life. But I couldn't take him on alone. He held all the financial power after 2 decades of me deferring to his breadwinner status. That's when Grant, my older brother, stepped in as my first line of defense. "You can't let that bastard bully you out of everything," he growled after I spilled the whole sordid tale over a bottle of Cabernet at his place. We were kindred hot-headed spirits, a fact our parents lamented over frequently while we were young hotheads. "Easy for you to say," I sniffed, wiping away angry tears. "You're not the one being discarded like trash after sacrificing my best years." Grant slammed his fist on the table, those flashing eyes of emerald fury I knew so well. "That soon-to-be broke-dick loser husband of yours is out of his damn mind if he thinks he can treat you this way. We'll bury the son of a bitch in legal fees and public shame if we have to." I felt a surge of gratitude for having at least one person utterly on my side through this nightmare. I want to take him for everything he's worth. Every broke-dick penny. "That's my girl." Grant cracked a rare grin, that mischievous sparkle back in his eyes like when we used to egg houses as teens. "You let your big brother take the wheel on this one, sis. Old Darren doesn't know what he's in for." I returned a shaky smile back, feeling a flicker of hope despite the chaos. There would be hell to pay. I would make certain of that. No one abandons me without reaping the whirlwind. The next day, I got my second formidable ally when Sylvia, my best friend since freshman year of college, arrived on my doorstep. "I can't believe that scumbag is trying to put you out on the street," she fumed, pulling me into a rib-cracking bear hug. Despite her ferocity, just having Sylvia's presence calmed me. She'd been my rock during every major life event the past 20 years. And now, true to form, she had my back during this worst betrayal of all. "He won't get away with it," I assured her, feeling a surge of new resolve. "Grant and I have started making preparations." Sylvia's eyes narrowed to slits. "You're going to take that cheating sack down, aren't you?" I nodded, surprised at how little guilt I felt. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a selfish stranger. Mother was untamed. It was time to fight for my surrender. "Well, you're going to need compromat, all the ammo you can get on that scumbag," Sylvia said. "All business now. Financials, dirtbag stuff, anything we can use." She rubbed her hands together with relish. "I'm just the legal pit bull you need." She shot me a savage grin. "Darren wants to tango? Well, this bitch has a mean tango." Despite the coming war, I couldn't stop the startled laugh that burst from my lips. With Sylvia and Grant at my side, I suddenly had formidable reinforcements. Let the games begin. Over the next few weeks, we formed a united front, my own personal team of overlords. Sylvia brought her expertise as a top family attorney, while Grant worked his accounting contacts for intel on Darren's money trail. Slowly, I felt the shreds of my confidence and thirst for vengeance re-emerging. Darren could play the victim all he wanted, blaming me for our martial breakdown. But he was about to learn, in horrific detail, the catastrophic consequences of underestimating a betrayed woman. I would orchestrate his downfall through his own hubris and greed, those twin curses that caused his undoing. By the time I was through, Darren would not only be a broken man, but Ethan would finally see his father for the desiccated soul he truly was. At last, my son and I would gain the freedom to flourish without his black market toxicity. With Sylvia's dogged legal assistance, I started gathering ammunition for the war ahead. Bank statements, emails, text messages, anything that could expose Darren's rotten core and shady business dealings. It turned out Mr. Entrepreneurial Real Estate Man had been cutting quite a few unscrupulous corners over the years. Fraudulent property valuations, kickbacks from mortgage brokers, even under-the-table payoffs to building inspectors. Sylvia cackled with delight as she pored over the evidence. "This worm is going down harder than a drunk prom date," she assured me one evening over takeout curry. "No judge will let him keep the kids once they see what a scumbag deadbeat he is." I felt a grim satisfaction watching the box of incriminating files grow. Darren's affair had turned my whole existence upside down. Well, now I would return the favor by systematically dismantling his precious empire, beginning with his ruined professional reputation. But that night, the true scope of Darren's deceit took an even more sickening turn when Grant called in a panic. "Oh my God, Riss, you're not going to believe the filth I just uncovered about that little bimbo, Lena." My heart pounded as he recounted her long, calculated history of targeting wealthy married men across multiple states. Social media profiles revealed a sinister pattern of love-bombing men, getting them to leave their wives and families, then milking them for cash and gifts until she got bored and discarded them. Her trail of ruined homes and empty bank accounts spanned over a decade. "She's a professional homewrecker," I muttered numbly after hearing it all. The full depths of her predation on my family sank in, stoking the flames of hatred even higher. The scheming little monster. "Precisely," Grant growled, so full of disgust I could picture his face flushing crimson. "And that's not even the worst of it. Old pal from high school who works Vice sent over some police reports." As he laid out the grisly new details, my blood turned to ice in my veins. Arrests for solicitation, allegations of theft, stalking, and drug charges. Lena was far more nefarious than some harmless gold-digging floozy. "Oh my God," I gasped once he finished, my head spinning. "How could Darren be taken in by her?" "That's what she does, Riss," Grant said grimly. "She preys on weak, desperate losers going through a midlife crisis. That snake had her sights set on the next big score." I was shaking with revulsion, picturing Lena sinking her claws into my unwitting husband. For all my anger at Darren, he didn't deserve to be manipulated and discarded by a sociopathic criminal. I felt bile rise in my throat. Nobody plays with my family without suffering the ultimate consequences. "We need to end this now," I said, a cold finality in my voice that surprised even me. "Darren has severely underestimated who he's dealing with." There was a low chuckle on the other end. "Never did like having to learn a lesson twice, did he?" I allowed the faintest hint of a grim smile, despite my fury. "No, he never was very bright when it came to reality checks." "Well then," Grant concluded darkly, "I'd say it's high time we issue the corrective before he ruins the rest of all our lives." For the rest of that night, exhaustion eluded me as my mind whirled with the new intelligence about Lena's true evil nature. Clearly, she represented a threat far more dangerous than just a passing midlife fling. She was a calculated, immoral predator, diligently working her way through every wealthy idiot foolish enough to stray. Well, I would happily become her undoing. No one destroys my family's lives without paying a butcher's ransom in return. The time had come to use every tool in my arsenal to cut out the fetid, infected limbs dragging us down. I would stop at nothing until Darren and his degenerate whore had their worlds cremated to ashes at their feet. Only then, after being forged in the flames of their arousal selfishness, would both of them finally understand the devastation they had wrought. Vengeance may be unsavory, but sometimes it's the only deterrent for such unconscionable acts. Over the next few weeks, Darren seemed to relish flaunting his new life of sin with Lena in my face. Brazen selfies and check-ins at fancy restaurants taunted me on social media. My stomach turned watching the sordid displays of Darren draping his arms around the woman who had detonated my world. But I maintained an eerie calm, secure in the knowledge that their ego-fueled bliss was willfully oblivious to the coming storm. "Look at them," Darren sneered one afternoon, the first time Lena joined one of our interim custody meetings. He shoved his phone across the table, a photo of the smirking bimbo posing in lingerie splayed across the screen. Isn't she incredible? I refused to look, keeping my eyes locked on his with a withering stare. Yes, she certainly seems accomplished at her profession. Lena's heavily made-up face twisted in confusion as she opened her obliviously overlined lips. My what? Let's stay focused, Sylvia interrupted with a bemused look. She was taking undisguised glee in refereeing the humiliation that lay ahead for the gruesome twosome. Back at the house, Ethan remained sullen and withdrawn, keeping to his room and barely looking at Darren during their court-mandated visits. Infuriatingly, the affair degenerate seemed more concerned with showing off his new plaything than reconnecting with his only child. You've barely spoken to your son in weeks, I said coolly after enduring yet another long dinner disrupted by Lena's shrill, inane chatter. Darren waved a dismissive hand, eyes glassy from too much wine. He's dealing with the divorce in his own way. You know teenagers? I know betrayed kids too, I said evenly, locking eyes with the hollow shells where his soul used to reside. At least with you out of the picture, mine can finally heal from the trauma of having such a wretched, absent father. Rage flickered across Darren's face then as he realized the depths of my disgust. You smug bitch. What gives you the right to shut me out? My lips curled into a sneer of pure contempt. Still playing the victim card? That ship has sailed, asshole. Time to face the consequences of your depraved choices. Is that a threat? Lena snarled, outraged that anyone dared defy her latest married meal ticket. A promise, I hissed back with undisguised loathing. You brazen hussies think you can just take whatever families and homes you want by opening your fish holes? Time to learn some manners. Mom, please, stop. Ethan's stricken voice cut through the venom, but I was too transfixed on administering consequences to the poisonous snakes infesting our lives. You're going to regret this disrespect, Darren said in a low, menacing tone that might have cowed me years ago. I'll take everything if you force me to. I let out a bark of laughter, unable to contain my derision. For weeks, I'd allowed their circus of depravity to play out, getting them overconfident and complacent. But now their sneering, self-entitled arrogance would seal their doom. By all means, take your best shot, I said with a shrug. Nothing would make me happier than legally eviscerating you both before burning the remains. Darren's eyes widened slightly, as if finally glimpsing the full extent of what he had unleashed. I didn't bother to hide my vindictive smirk. Let him marinate in dread. It was but a faint taste of the hell to come. Sylvia slid a folder of paperwork across the table then, still grinning. We've prepared a preliminary asset division agreement for your consideration. As the sniveling fools pawed through the legalese, my gaze drifted to Ethan. His young face was etched with misery and resignation that no child should have to bear. It cemented my resolve. Ridding our lives of Darren and Lena's toxic effects was non-negotiable. They could dismiss me as some deranged, overly dramatic shrew for now, but soon their overconfident arrogance would be shattered. Underestimating me, a mother pushed to the brink, would be the first in a catastrophic series of errors, and I would luxuriate in every anguished second of their undoing. With each passing week, Darren and Lena's arrogance reached offensive new heights. Public displays of affection and taunting posts filled their social media accounts, rubbing my face in their debauched bliss. Look at this, Lena crowed one afternoon, sidling up to shove her phone in my face. It showed Darren beaming as the gold-digging whore modeled a brand-new diamond tennis bracelet he'd gifted her. Your sleazeball ex-husband has such incredible taste, doesn't he? I fixed her with a look of pure revulsion. Yes, he always did have discriminating taste in overpriced trash. Lena's heavy makeup couldn't mask the flash of rage across her vapid features. You're just a bitter, jealous old hag hanging onto the past. A cruel smile slowly spread across my lips. And you're a two-bit prostitute hanging on to whatever married scumbag will leak his billfold. Isn't that right, dear? With a shriek of incoherent fury, Lena raised her bejeweled hand to strike me. But Darren quickly grabbed her wrist, an admonishing look on his smug face. Now, ladies, let's not let our claws out in front of the boy. He shot a pointed glance toward Ethan, who was frozen in shock and embarrassment at the unseemly scene. The poor kid was being forced to witness the dregs of depravity thanks to his father's insatiable lust. "See what a degenerate bitch you raised your son around all these years?" Lena hissed through painted lips, struggling against Darren's grip. "I'll show him what a real woman is like once the divorce is final." White-hot rage lanced through me at the thought of this scorpion mother trying to slither her way into my child's life. Ethan was paying enough for his dad's mistakes without adding Lena's poison into the equation. "Over my dead body," I snarled, rising to my feet with clenched fists. "I'll bury you in litigation for the rest of your wasted life before I let you blight my son." Darren's face hardened and he stepped between us. "You're the one who made this divorce inevitable through your constant contempt and disrespect. Don't act so above it all. Your neurotic bitterness is what's destroying this family." "Enough." The shout came not from me, but from Ethan. We all turned in stunned silence as my son gestured wildly, anguish and rage etched across his young face. "I can't take this anymore. You two are the most selfish human beings on the planet. Do you have any idea what you're putting me through?" Darren made a move toward him. "Now, son, you just need to." "Shut up!" Ethan roared, angrier than I'd ever seen. He pointed a shaking finger at Lena, who gaped like an overstuffed fish. "And you? You're nothing more than a cheap hooker trying to buy a new family." He whirled back towards his father, wild-eyed. "And you? Trading in your real family for this whore. I don't even recognize you anymore. I'm so disgusted, so ashamed of what you've become." Tears streaked down Ethan's face then, and any remaining anger melted into heartbreak. He fled from the room, unable to endure another moment of toxicity from the monsters who destroyed our family. For several long moments, an uneasy silence hung over the shattered remains of the ugly scene. I stared at Darren with a mixture of hatred and pity. This deluded fool truly had no idea the calamity he'd invited by chasing his reckless affair. Well, it was long past time I pried those scales from his willfully blind eyes. "You think this is disrespect?" I said in a low, dangerous tone. I leaned across the table, glaring straight through him. "You have no idea the world of torment I'm about to unleash on you both. Consider this a mere overture to the main event." Lena opened her mouth, possibly to shriek more indignant protests, but I silenced her with a single frigid look. "Starting tomorrow, the real games begin," I said with steel in my voice. "And by the time this is over, I'll have burned you straight through the core of your rotten, worthless souls." With that vow hanging in the air, I turned and walked out, back ramrod straight. The unraveling had officially begun. Darren and his mistress were about to reap the consequences of their despicable actions. No more Mrs. Nice Girl. From here on out, the only priority was mutually assured destruction. True to my promise, the shockwaves of my retaliation plan began rippling out the very next day. Thanks to Sylvia's tireless work, a deluge of legal motions and allegations hit Darren from every angle imaginable. First came the notices of civil lawsuits, painting him as a fraudulent real estate developer, enriching himself through graft and racketeering. A barrage of paperwork detailed inflated home valuations, kickbacks from loan officers, even bribes paid to municipal inspectors. His shady business practices, once camouflaged behind legitimate transactions, were now laid bare in painstaking detail. Next, the criminal charges started trickling in. Money laundering, tax evasion, even allegations of investment fund misappropriation. Within a matter of days, what few legitimate business dealings Darren had were frozen as authorities began seizing assets and combing through financials. The once swaggering businessman who had so casually devastated my life was now scrambling just to keep his head above water as the ocean waves crashed over him. Of course, the vulture Lena was first to cut and run once Darren's looming legal catastrophe came into focus. One sunny afternoon, she was standing on my doorstep, raccoon eyes leaking mascara, designer luggage in tow. "You did this," she wailed, blotchy face contorted with anguish. "You crazy bitch destroyed everything." I blinked at her with mocking innocence. "I'm sorry. I don't follow. My husband abandoned me, so I took reasonable recourse to protect my financial interests, completely within my legal rights." "My rights," Lena raged, stamping her foot. "I have rights, too. All of Darren's money and assets are mine now. We were starting a new life." A cruel smile twisted my lips then. "Ah, did the little gold digger's cash cow run dry? Too bad your talons couldn't sink in deep enough before we pried them out. With a scream of bilious fury, Lena hurled her oversized designer tote at me, spilling its contents across the doorstep in a jumbled mess. Then she spun on her studded heel and fled, weeping incoherently all the while. I watched her broken, despondent figure retreat down the driveway. Good riddance to that tank of tainted money and soul poison. Darren showed up later that evening, haggard and sweat-stained. He barged past me, red-faced and shaking, and started sweeping the discarded items on the porch into a box. "So is this what you wanted?" he panted, shooting me a hate-filled look. "I'm ruined, facing jail time. Is that enough justice for you?" I stared at him in cold silence, unmoved by his tantrum. For weeks, I had diligently gathered evidence of his corruption, providing a veritable roadmap for the feds to utterly dismantle his nefarious practices. And now he was reaping his deserved misery. "This is merely a down payment," I said in an arctic tone. "For every second of anguish you put me and Ethan through, I intend to excind from your flesh until you understand the meaning of the word suffering." Darren's expression flickered with a hint of worry then as my words drove home. For the first time, he seemed to truly comprehend the depthless determination behind my pursuit of vengeance. You won't get away with this," he sputtered. "I'll fight this in court. I'll take you for everything." I let out a short bark of laughter. "Oh, Darren, you sweet deluded fool, this is merely the opening salvo of consequences for your unspeakable betrayal and immorality. The body blows are still yet to come." I took a threatening step closer, eyes blazing with fury. "The utter ruination of your body, spirit, and financial empire is now an inevitability. And once you are gasping among the cinders of your miserable existence, you may yet learn an iota of the devastation your actions have caused." Darren recoiled from me then like a scalded dog, the box of Lena's hastily abandoned belongings clutched to his chest like a shield. For the briefest of moments, a flash of terror crossed his face before the mask of indignant defiance slipped back into place. "You're insane," he managed weakly. "A spiteful monster." A cruel smile twisted my lips as I reached to slam the door in his face. "No, my dear, simply a harbinger of your well-deserved descent into hell." The clang of the door closing echoed through the foyer as I walked away without a second glance. The shockwaves were still radiating outward, dismantling every facet of Darren's wretched existence, piece by agonizing piece. And I would be front and center, savoring every shriek of torment, until his debt was paid in full. Only then would my own soul finally find peace. The weeks and months that followed were a legal grind, but the outcome was never in doubt. Not after I'd thoroughly dismantled every pillar of Darren's formerly comfortable existence. Arraignments, depositions, bankruptcy filings, I stalked the courthouses with grim determination, ensuring each chink in his armor was pried wider until he was left defenseless. Sylvia barely had to enter their room before judges and arbiters began sharpening their gavels for the kill. Through it all, the costly legal bombardment drained Darren's remaining assets down to husks. I watched with unconcealed delight as his expensive suits turned to rags and his prized sports cars were seized by the bank. His palatial home, the scene of countless fake idyllic evenings, was lost to foreclosure. In the end, the man who had so brazenly discarded my unwavering devotion was left with nothing but the ashes of his ruined life. Lena, of course, was long gone, just another invisible statistic among the trail of discarded married men in her wake. Darren tried negotiating, begging for mercy, even brazenly attempting to guilt me by throwing Ethan in my face. But it was far too late for that. He had detonated our sacred family unit. The consequences of his betrayal were a riptide that would sweep away every rotten thing he'd ever cherished. On the day of his final sentencing, I felt zero pity watching the husk of the man I'd once loved shuffle into the courthouse, a ghastly specter of despair in ill-fitting second-hand clothes. Greed, ego, and lust had finally caught up to him in the form of a 7-year sentence for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. "Well, here we are," he said hoarsely, head hung low in defeat. "The end of the road you promised." I said nothing, staring at him coolly as Sylvia loudly shuffled some papers beside me. "Aren't you going to gloat?" Darren's voice was barely above a croak. "Give me one final kick while I'm down." I regarded him for a long moment before speaking. "Gloating would imply I took pleasure in reducing you to this. I said calmly. "The truth is, I feel nothing but revulsion at the depths of your depravity." A tremor passed across Darren's ruined face then. "How could you ever let it come to this? We had 20 years of family." "We had nothing." My voice was ice cold. "You made the choice to sacrifice everything for selfish temporary desire and indulgence. You cast away 2 decades of my loyalty and commitment for what? A handful of mediocre orgasms and trinkets for that disposable whore?" I jabbed a finger towards him, rage resurging for one final crest. "You did this to yourself, Darren. My job was simply ensuring you understood the consequences of your depraved choices." Darren opened his mouth, perhaps to grovel or plead yet again. But a booming voice interrupted from the front of the courtroom. "Darren Michael Landis, you've been found guilty by this court of 32 counts of fraud and financial misdealing, as well as tax evasion. The people hereby sentence you to 84 months imprisonment in the state correctional system, with additional financial restitutions and penalties to follow. This court is adjourned." The gavel cracked down like a thunderclap, sealing the end of Darren's miserable chapter. As bailiffs moved in to escort the handcuffed wretch of a man away, he turned towards me with sunken, wretched eyes. "I hope, one day, you find peace." With that, he was removed through the towering oak doors, transported off to start his hard new life of imprisonment and misery. And although his words should have vindicated me, I felt nothing but hollowness inside. The man who vowed eternal love and family was forever buried. What was left was simply karma's receipt, the remorseless cost of his transgressions come due. I watched through the courtroom windows as the armored transport pulled away, Darren becoming just another inmate, numbered drowning in the atrophy of regret and shattered potential. It would be a long road of empty cells, indignity, and iron bars ahead. But that path was of his own making. My role had simply been the messenger of his consequences. I may have swung the final hammer, but he was the one who willfully triggered his own destruction from the start. And as I stepped out into the brisk air, ready to rejoin Ethan and return to rebuilding our new lives, I felt unburdened. There would be no more poison, manipulation, or moral bankruptcy dictated by Darren's black hole of selfishness. We were free now, and I would ensure we stayed that way for the rest of our days.